Maakola. And so for those of you who are not aware, Maakola is a made-to-order sustainable fashion brand founded and run by Aurora Chiste, who's on this call. And Aurora founded Maakola with one mission, and that was to create clothes that make women feel beautiful while standing for what they believe in. And this event is part of the Conscious Beauty series. It's a month-long series of events exploring how to cultivate beauty across the entire value chain. And you can check out the other events on offer at consciousbeauty.me. So I'm your moderator today. My name is Alpa Shah. I'm an economist by day, working in the world of international policy and economics. But today I have a slightly different hat on, a fashion and sustainable development enthusiast, and I hope we can shed some light on important questions of fashion, beauty, and sustainability. So today's session, as you know, is called Conscious Beauty, a Matter for the SDGs. So fashion and beauty are two of the most polluting industries in the global economy. And so we see change in these industries as being directly connected with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, particularly those that are related to sustainable and responsible consumption and production, so SDG 12, and those related to climate action and the environment, so 13, 14, and 15. And we think it's fair to say that these industries seem to have been quite slow to react to the global climate change movement. And many consumers, many or most consumers and producers are quite confused or unaware of what sustainability in the fashion and beauty supply chains really means. So our aim with this session is to build upon work that is out there and going on and raise awareness of these issues. And you'll notice our session is timed to coincide with the end of New York Fashion Week, the beginning of the UN General Assembly, and in parallel with Climate Week in New York. So our aim in this session is to join the conversation in understanding how these two industries can align with the SDGs. So today we'll be listening to three incredibly knowledgeable experts in these areas, many years working on issues of fashion, beauty, and sustainability in different capacities. So just some quick introductions. So we have Lisa Morales, who has 25 years of experience working in fashion and with tech companies and with fashion companies. She is the co-founder of both the Worldwide Supply Chain Federation and Refashioned, which is an early stage supply chain technology venture fund that invests in startups that are refashioning the global supply chain. We also have Alessandra Ciccotosto, who has spent her career in the beauty industry and is the marketing manager for the pioneering organic beauty brand OWay. And we have Colette Grosscurt, who professionally works for a sustainable asset management company, but is also the co-founder of Shaping Fashion, which is a global initiative to scale sustainable transformations in the fashion industry and is actively involved in the annual Fashion Revolution Week. Just some housekeeping before we get started with the discussions to all the participants. If you have any questions for the speakers while they're talking, please write them in the chat function, and we have set aside some time at the end of the session to answer your questions. So without further ado, we can get started. And I'd like to first turn to you, Colette. And so the fashion industry, for those who are less familiar, what are we dealing with here? What is the scale of the issue? Maybe you could explain to us what you see as the most pressing sustainability issues across the whole fashion supply chain, and what are some of the estimated impacts on the environment?
Yeah, sure. Thanks a lot for the introductions, and happy to explain a bit more and to share my knowledge on this topic, because I think it's still a very important topic that not a lot of people are aware about. So happy to go into it. So I think when you look at the fashion industry, it's very important to keep in mind that we've gone through quite an economic development over the last decades, where you may have noticed in your own surroundings that the industry has actually moved to a different type of business model than what it used to be. So we see actually that a typical fashion industry, or like the largest players in the fashion industry, are now scattered all over the globe with their supply chains. So clothes are being made in different parts in the world, raw materials are being sourced from different parts in the world, and we buy and sell clothes in different parts of the world. So this aspect of a very complex global supply chain has huge environmental impacts and social impacts. That can be positive in some cases, but unfortunately there's also still a lot of negatives going on, and we see that there's increasing attention for those as well, which is a good thing, I think. So maybe zooming in on some of the largest impacts, I'll shortly sketch what the supply chain looks like. So a typical supply chain of, for example, a t-shirt. We grow cotton, for example, in the sourcing countries like India, Bangladesh, these regions. And then the cotton is being shipped to manufacturing sites where the material is transformed into spinning and yarn, so it can actually be created into textiles. Then these textiles are again often shipped also to another location where they're being cut and trimmed and dyed and processed into something that looks more and more like the t-shirt that you're working towards. And then usually that happens also mostly in the Asian countries still, and then that is then shipped to the retail locations all across the globe, actually. So this is an interesting thing, and actually along the supply chain, various impacts play a bigger or a smaller role. So one impact is, for example, the impact on climate change, like you already said. There's huge amounts of greenhouse gas emissions at play when we look at, for example, the energy that's used in the raw material production. So actually producing the cotton and turning it into yarn, for example, is quite energy intensive. And there's quite some solutions out there to make it more energy efficient, but there's a huge gap. If you're interested in this topic, I can really recommend Fashion on Climate. It's a report by McKinsey and the Global Fashion Agenda, which they recently released on this topic. And then another aspect that's very important is water consumption and water pollution. So a lot of us don't realize, but to grow a cotton plant requires a lot of water. It's often grown in very dry regions of the world. So on the one hand, it consumes a lot of water. And on the other hand, we use a lot of agrochemicals, so pesticides or fertilizers, to make sure that it grows in a way that, and it's not affected by insects or other types of pests that can, have a detrimental effect on your yield if you don't use it. So these two aspects have a huge impact as well. And another part in the supply chain where water plays a big role is actually in the consumption phase. So also when we are using and washing our clothes, for example, we are both using a lot of water for that, and we are also polluting the water by the detergents that we use and the microfibers that are released during that phase. So that's, those are sort of like some of the impacts that are now getting more and more attention. And we also see that some of the solutions are moving into that direction. And maybe one other thing to mention is, for example, biodiversity and land use, as well as waste. Those are other environmental impacts that the fashion industry has an influence on, either through the growing of cotton or the herding of cattle, for example, for leather, but also through the huge amounts of fashion that is consumed in a lot of countries nowadays, because it's become so cheap and it's become a trend to reinvent yourself every other, I don't know, day even with a new outfit. So I think that results in a lot of waste, which has to move to landfill, is incinerated, so lots of chemicals released again, and lots of greenhouse gas emissions again as well. So this is sort of like a short sketch of mainly environmental impacts. Of course, there are also still the social impacts. I don't know if you want me to zoom in on that as well, but let me know what you think is interesting to you.
Yeah, and just to elaborate a bit, you mentioned cotton and leather, and what about some of the synthetic products that we often find in our clothing? To what extent are they being used, and what are the impacts of those elements on the environment?
Yeah, so a lot of the synthetic products are made actually from the raw material of oil. So that has, of course, huge impacts again on climate, because also to turn the oil into polyester, for example, requires a lot of energy. And also there you see there's lots of efficiency gains to be made. And also the fact that it ends up in landfill, right? If we burn it again, it will emit greenhouse gas emissions as well. So there's also that aspect indeed. Yeah.
Thank you. It's a really interesting and a very helpful sketch, I think, of some of the key issues. Lisa, so you have been working for many years with different industry players. Why have we got to the place we're in, from your experience? What are the key factors that have driven the fast fashion evolution? And why do we see this dominating the market? And what are the barriers to change?
Yeah, so there are so many factors that have contributed to this, but I'll give some personal anecdotes. When I founded the New York Fashion Tech Lab in 2014, I did so after going through Techstars, which is the largest global tech accelerator, with my fashion tech company, thinking that they would have access to the industry players, C-suite executives, because I was building something for fashion and retail. They did not. So when I realized that during the program, VCs won't admit what they don't know. Shocking. and so I kept on getting a lot of, oh, sweetheart, why don't you just buy some inventory like that nasty gal? And I'd look at them saying, well, why are they letting you cut checks if you can't tell the difference between a traditional e-commerce brand, nasty gal, and what I've built, which is an evolution in search? Is it because both interfaces show fashion? And it's like something just tunes out in their head, does not compute, must change to a pattern I can recognize. So there's a massive lack of capital being deployed into the needed innovations. And as Fashion for Good, and I believe it was BCG at Davos this year presented, there is such a lack of capital in early stage fashion supply chain companies to the tune of about 20 to 30 billion dollars needing to be deployed every year between now and 2030 for the industry to have a remote chance of making its sustainability goals it has set for itself. And I was just recently interviewed by the Economist on this topic, and the guy was shocked, saying, well, how much is actually being deployed in early stage fashion supply chain? And I said, I believe I know most of the fashion supply chain VC funds, and I'd hazard a guess of maybe on the upside 100 million. So we are far off of the targets that need to happen. And I believe a huge part of that is because the people that have controlled capital they invest in what they know and what they have interests in. And for a long time, it's been white men that have controlled capital. So after going through Techstars, we failed. The day after I shut down, I got a call from ASOS, head of global innovation, saying, what happened? You've made something we need, we've never seen before. I was like, I couldn't get to you. So instead of going to a founder depression, I founded the New York Fashion Tech Lab, trying to rectify this for the industry, saying, okay, if we could get the C-suite executives from major global brands, Macy's, J. Crew, Kate Spade, Ralph Lauren, Li & Fung, Global Brands Group, etc., to fund this program and to dedicate their C-suite executives to actually participate in it, we can hear directly from the industry what they find most valuable to their bottom line. And unfortunately, what I discovered is that the industry's C-suite executives are generally not incentivized to make the hard decisions that are needed. They're incentivized to invest in shiny objects, front-end consumer-facing experiences that get them press and get them their bonus. And they don't care if the company goes under in 5 years because they're out of there in 3 with their golden parachute. So I was really frustrated having just birthed this amazing accelerator and realizing that the industry couldn't help themselves. My big insight was they were investing in agile front-end consumer-facing experiences with a static back-end, their supply chain. So I left after the first cohort to study the apparel supply chain for a year and came up with my own thesis, really looking to solve for the $50 billion worth of dead stock that's in the US, the fact that we produce 4 times the textile waste of any other country in the world, that we used to ship it overseas and nobody is taking it anymore, thankfully. And other countries are coming up with legislation that actually is going to create end-of-life reuse around textiles. So, and of course, the fact that we've addicted our consumer to fast fashion. we only have 10 years, folks, so we don't have enough time to unaddict them. We've literally been beating this sustainability drum for 36 years. So putting all that into motion as my problem set to solve for, I took a year of study and research to solve for it. And as a good design thinking student, I came up with my thesis and I made a deck and I presented it to private equity funds investing in the future of the apparel supply chain and huge brands. And it was Ed Lam at Li & Fung that first said to me, "No, we haven't seen anything like this." And I was floored. The concept is really simple, that if you're a systems thinker, our current globalized supply chains are far too massive to try to retrofit node by node. It is simply cheaper and faster for us now to build a new paradigm from the ground up as localized infrastructure. And that looks like distributed collaborative microfactories connected via a shared data layer for real-time throughput capacity load bearing, and then having shared infrastructure that brings the cost down for everyone. And you're looking at more like, I don't know a better term to describe this, but like a timeshare model across this network of factories. So you're not actually saying, I need 1 million of this t-shirt. You have time to produce 1 million units of something, and it can be 1 million different things. So you're really working towards a demand chain versus a supply chain, and your volume shifts from your finished goods to your raw materials, which now is that mountain of textile waste that we're sitting on in our country that goes to landfill or incineration. There are new innovations like Evernew that use that as the new raw material that we can circularly regenerate 4 times before it breaks down to its sugars. Those sugars can then be fed to bacteria to create new fiber. So we're literally sitting on generations of textile production if we don't grow another single tree or cotton or hemp or anything.
Thank you. That's extremely interesting. And I think we want to hear much more about these solutions and these models. With diagnosing the problem, from what I hear, it sounds like, globalization just accelerated these global supply chains, and we have a combination of wrong incentives, or incentives in the financial, in those who fund, those who produce, and the consumers, which have kind of generated this fast fashion. But now we see some moves with this legislation that you mentioned to prevent shipping of waste products, and with the crisis, which we'll talk about shortly in the next round of discussion. Extremely interesting. And I want to move now from fashion to beauty. So turning to Alessandra, we want to hear as well what from your experience, what are the main sustainability issues in the beauty industry? There are, of course, some similarities, but some key differences as well. What are the key issues with the traditional kind of mass market beauty supply chain, and what motivated you to enter this space and to create OWay?
Okay, thanks for your invitation, and it's interesting because usually it's very famous to speak about fast fashion, but not fast beauty, no, fast beauty consumption. And what happened in the last 10 years, that the people all around the world, above all in some countries, I discovered a new interest in natural products. So the first problem for beauty, in my opinion, is the green concept. What does it mean? What does it mean when I speak about a cosmetic of what is green or natural? And in the last 10 years, a lot of people thought that natural ingredients was realized a better face cream or color. And at the beginning, people asked to the beauty companies natural ingredients from plants, you know. So I had seen in my experience that how much is changed in the last 10 years about what is now the concept of sustainability beauty products. Because at the end, many people ask me or to a company like OWay, what does it mean that a cosmetic can be sustainable? And my answer is very easy. To be sustainable means have a less impact on the planet. And the less impact for a product, for a cosmetic, means what is inside the bottle, and what is the bottle, and what are the process of the supply chain to obtain that products. Just to give you some numbers, according to the Zero Waste Week, the beauty industry produced billions of not recyclable packaging units a year. So in 2 years ago alone, it recorded about 120 billion plastic packaging with an high environmental impact on the planet. So you can imagine how many products in the last 70 years in plastic was realized, and which kind of impact has created on the planet. Are numbers that we know, and numbers that ONU give us every day about the plastic in the sea, not only for packaging, but also for ingredients that are in the product, for instance, are very famous in microplastic. In fact, in European legislation, there is a very important new rule about the use of microplastics in the ingredients. The first was around 2 years that every company that realized products like scrubs or peeling with the microplastic was not allowed now in the market, and very soon other kind of product like this with microplastic will be not allowed in the market. This is just an example because the cosmetics is made of ingredients, and now if we see natural, vegan or cruelty-free are topics far from sustainability. This is interesting. Sometimes consumers, when they buy something, they are very, in the last 10 years, so we can imagine how much is important now. They check the labels, they analyze the symbols, but there is, in my opinion, a big confusion of what does it mean about the performance of the ingredients, what is clean or what is green, and or guarantees a less impact on the planet. So I think that in the last years, a lot of companies of different dimensions, different sizes, has started a big revolution, creating or transforming their products till a revolution, a sustainability revolution. Of course, it's normal that for big companies, this means make a big effort, because means change every packaging, every bottle, every tube, so it's not easy. To come in OWay, OWay was born like this. Organic Way, in our experience, we are a medium company, but we started with the organic concept in ingredients, and this is very important for what we mean when we speak about natural ingredients but that are sustainable. Because if a natural or derived extract like essential oils, a pure plants that are an extract in the product come from organic biodynamic methods and farms, this means to push a concept of agroecological method in farming to realize the product. So what is sustainable now means this. from where the ingredients come, sorry, where the ingredients, there is the ingredients derivation. This is interesting. The natural resources and how a plant grows and give us the power of this method. So in a way, there are 2 points very, very important in my opinion. First of all, 10 years ago, we are a manufacturing company. We decided to be a farmer. So we grow our plants in biodynamic way, and we extract at 0 miles our ingredients using our biodynamic ingredients, or create collaboration with other farmers, organic or biodynamic. And the second point very important is that 7 years ago, we decided to eliminate every plastic bottle, choosing only glass and aluminum. Why? Because glass and aluminum are the best materials to the final part of the supply chain, because our packaging complete recyclable. I remember that plastic is not always recyclable, and it's very difficult to recycle in many ways. It's not possible or very difficult. So we decided to use glass and aluminum, avoiding over packaging. Sometimes people ask me, less is more, the very famous designer sentence. I think that yes, but if you obtain a nice product. What does it mean? Nice, I mean that in a way we analyze very much the details, the external aspect of the product, the design of the product, because if our consumers love our product, they became ecologists with us. So sometimes I've seen in my experience that people said, okay, it's sustainable, it's green, but I don't know if I can follow the fashion trends with this. I don't know if I like the packaging. So the big revolution is to realize high level quality products, concentrated formula, recyclable packaging, and checking every aspect of the supply chain, from the eco-projection of the communication and the social corporate responsibility, what you push on your consumers as values of your brand.
Thank you very much. I think that's an extremely interesting insight into the beauty industry. I mean, there's so much focus on fashion, but you raise a number of points, and this consumer aspect is very interesting. That, you know, the supply chain is important, but in both industries, it's the marketing of sustainable products is extremely important to change consumer behavior. And even Lisa mentioned this kind of addiction to the fast fashion. We can explore that perhaps later. How do we change behavior, and how much does it come from the supply or the demand side? So turning from a diagnosis of the problems to the solutions, perhaps we can think about what can change going forward. And Lisa, you started to mention some of the work that you've done transforming business models to be more sustainable. Perhaps you could elaborate a little more on this work, and what do you see as essential characteristics for these kinds of sustainable business models?
Sure thing. You know, I'm just a design thinking student who loves problem solving and systems thinking. And so I just find this a fascinating problem set. I think that some of the insights I've learned along the way is that we do need to shift also corporate mindsets. And leadership needs to understand there's a difference if you are truly trying to make your supply chain sustainable and circular and transparent with actual receipts on what your impact is, instead of this nebulous, oh, carbon neutral by X date. Show me the receipts. So one of the biggest insights is that we need to start with the constraints and really educating corporations about that. They're like, in this industry is extremely difficult because creative is king. And so it took me a long time to find certain brands that really are putting their money where their mouth is. And so it's more like an episode of Project Runway, where instead of thinking that you're so limited by these constraints, you think of it as part of the design challenge. Okay, designers, this week you're working with Evernews, News Cycle, cellulose-based fibers. You can create athleisure, t-shirts. You know, you can print using Cornet's waterless printing, and you can have certain customization aspects around the garment. Go create. You know, Project Runway has proven that you can be extremely creative, even working with trash. So I think it's just a matter of that mindset shift for brands to understand that if you do want to do this, it's more than just saying, well, this is our brand. How do we slap on some sustainable textiles or some measurement of some other node of our supply chain? It really has to be from the ground up, and it starts with constraints. The other big piece is that everyone is so in love with the landed cost of goods sold. And when you look at a globalized supply chain, the landed cost of goods sold isn't really truly being measured. You're looking at that $2 t-shirt, yay, $2, and who really produced it, where was it shipped from, you know, how many people are you employing to maintain that globalized supply chain that Colette laid out for us here, versus if you truly want to do a comparison of cost of goods sold, producing a localized supply chain where you may have a $10 t-shirt at cost, but your overall infrastructure to support that $10 t-shirt that is selling at full retail price and is pre-sold, and it's just a whole new shift in unit economics across the value chain. So we've been really working to educate people on how vastly different you need to be thinking about your infrastructure, and it's no longer time for band-aids and incremental shifts. It is time for paradigm shifts. And if you're not truly investing in those, then your company most likely won't exist in 10 years. 50% of the S&P 500 won't exist in 10 years. 50%. And we're seeing this happening real time with retail and fashion. We're starting to see hotel closures because of the pandemic. All of these factors are really helping to open the eyes of legacy brands to understand that their wealth and position is not infinite, that they need to learn to adapt or die. And frankly, hopefully, we can get that legacy players to understand that if they don't adapt, that in the 10 years we have left to really create an impact on this planet, we all will die. And there's no business to be done on a dead planet.
Yeah, extremely true. And I think in terms of the current climate, I mean, it seems that a lot of people, or at least some people, have been working on these issues for a very long time, but with slow change. But it does seem like with this new global climate change movement accelerating, and with the pandemic, we may be at this kind of inflection point to accelerate change. And you mentioned some of the trends that we're seeing. I wonder, Colette, if you could elaborate a little bit on some of the trends you see with the current crisis, and how has the pandemic impacted the fashion industry, and how can we leverage this in a positive way to accelerate change towards sustainable fashion?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, Lisa already touched upon a couple of items indeed. And you've probably, as a consumer, you experienced this whole pandemic yourself, of course, but maybe to highlight some of things specifically to the fashion industry, or actually, I think in a couple of industries they happened. So on the one hand, from an economic perspective, you saw that, demand was changing. So it was reducing in a lot of industries, but also changing in terms of channel because of shops closing down. More people went to online purchasing or e-commerce. So that's one of the trends that you saw happening, and that also meant a shift in the way that a lot of companies had been working so far, where actually some of them were still mainly focused on the traditional brick and mortar channel, so having actual customer experiences in shops. So now we see an interesting move to doing that online more. And then on the other hand, we saw huge disruptions in the supply of goods, because, as I said already, the industry is so scattered all across the globe, and the measures that were being taken were so different per country, that, well, in a lot of countries, actually, there was a complete lockdown, which meant that a lot of people in the manufacturing industry couldn't go to their factories, for example, and that also a lot of the retailers and brands actually, both didn't receive the orders that they had set out at the start of the season, but also, on the other hand, tried to get rid of their orders, right? So they started canceling orders that they had posted to these manufacturers. And this had various impacts. So on the one hand, you saw, especially on the social side, that a lot of these workers don't have social security, don't have fixed contracts, and are completely dependent on this very short-term, inflexible supply chain. And on the other hand, you also saw a lot of issues, financial issues, both from the brand side as well as the supplier side. So in the short term, the main thing that you saw happening was that, brands and suppliers had to start thinking in a different way about their financial relationships. So it was good to see that some actually leading brands on sustainability are looking into actually avoiding canceling orders, and also trying to compensate suppliers for the lack of income that they've seen because of other orders being cancelled, or the sort of providing financial let's say support in these hard times. So I think this is an indication already of where this crisis will, I think, move the whole industry. So I think that it will move more towards sustainable relationships with suppliers, rather than the sort of like short-term, I only care about cost price and that's it, kind of relationship that was still happening a lot in the industry. So I think on that side we will see a change. At the same time, you also see that, as you said as well, I think this crisis sort of made us all realize the value of the earth that we're living on. So indeed, this more awareness around what is sustainable from an environmental perspective will also make these brands see that actually their consumers will change in terms of what they demand from them. So they would want more sustainable materials. There's plenty of research out there, especially that the younger generations really value that kind of things in the products that they're consuming. So I think also there, this crisis actually will help in reinventing the whole industry. And in what way we'll have to see, but research shows that some of the, for example, sourcing managers of some of the largest brands have indicated that they want to move in a short term to more longer term supplier relationships and sourcing more sustainable raw materials as well. So I think that's a very nice and interesting trend to see as well. And maybe to wrap up, building on the more online environment that we're now all experiencing as well, this has also led to quite some innovations in the industry since the crisis. So you see a lot more digitization, where, for example, orders are made more from a demand side rather than a supply side, as well as the way the whole purchasing or the whole designing process goes, right? So there's more drafting 3D models and sourcing based on online sampling and online shows from manufacturers in conversations with buyers. So I think that also will be very interesting to see where we're going to be shopping our clothes in the future. It may be as an avatar in in a 3D setting rather than an offline shop. So I think there's plenty of things to happen there.
Yeah, wow, so much change. And I guess in a crisis, that's when we really see the most change often. So just to round out the discussion on kind of solutions, perhaps Alessandra, in the beauty industry, where do you see the biggest kind of change, and what are the main factors which are going to determine success in changing the beauty industry? What are the trends that you're seeing in the market, and where do you see potential moving forward?
First of all, I would like to give you a positive ideas. Okay, positive ideas about expectations. So what we have in the future of beauty industry, and what is the consumers' demand on cosmetics, because we see in our experience that almost every beauty company now is asking to their production what will be their future with the products and with sustainability topics. Because of course some brands are more ready and they have just made a lot of difficult choices, because you can imagine, for instance, for us, how much is difficult to eliminate every plastic bottle and substitute with glass and aluminum, but not only the paper, the boxes, every material that goes around the products in store, in the salon, in our case, because we work for a professional beauty salon, that are with paper, metals, wood. The wood should be certified, so every communication and tools material can be more sustainable for the communication, for the selling activity, for everything. Okay, for instance, we use 3-free paper. 3-free means that comes from the waste of food companies, and this is very interesting in products. Okay, I think that this year was the year of clean beauty, green beauty, but after the pandemic, the word is safety. For everything, for packaging, for ingredients, for the contact of the product and the ingredient with your skin and your hair. People are asking to the beauty companies more transparency in what we tell about the product and what we put inside the product, and the technology can help us very much to have information in a very easily way. Yesterday I read a Mintel research about the beauty trends in the next 10 years, and it's very interesting. It's interesting to discover that people are asking not only natural ingredients, they are asking biotechnology, science that help the organic ingredients to improve in the cosmetics formulas, and to have a biotechnology action in the products, because people are asking for a product that works very well for my needs. The problem of waste is when you buy something that is not useful for you. So it's absolutely important that people feel the company like a consultant that give me the best solution for my beauty and for my health, okay, and to avoiding waste, avoiding product that is not useful for my needs and for my ideas. So the words are from vegan to biotechnology. The slow beauty. Slow beauty means a solution fast in my lifestyle. I think that is not possible today. It speaks about sustainable topics without considering our lifestyle. Because the best and the company that, in my opinion, have success are the companies that create ecological solution for the new lifestyle. So you could give me the best solution if in my beauty routine, I apply this and this and this. Slow beauty means a sort of changing in the considering of the rituals, the beauty rituals, adapting in my lifestyle. So you can use only this quantity of product and not use how much you can. So less consumption, better consumption, and the concentrated formula. And why you have to use this and this no? So I think that it's possible for the beauty companies to explain in a very easy way why we are carbon neutral company, as Lisa mentioned, why you can use only this product and not this one else. And be very clear, very open. We, for instance, in OWay, we open our laboratory by internet, by the web. We are able to show everything, and people loves to see what is in the laboratory, what is in the manufacturing area. People are asking us to show everything.
Thank you. It's really interesting, and I think we've all been there, not knowing what to choose, and then lots of waste products. So I think this idea of really having items that work and are long-lasting is extremely important. And this idea of transparency, I think, leads to a really interesting question about our role as consumers. Just before I ask another question, I wanted to open up to the audience. So if you do have any questions for the speakers, please send them through to the chat function now, and we'll have time. We have 10 minutes left to answer those questions. But just while we're waiting for those, I suppose building on what Alessandra has just talked about, and the previous mentions of the consumer being addicted to fast fashion, and now, as Colette mentioned, there is this demand, at least from younger generations, or most notably from younger generations, for this kind of more sustainable product. As a consumer, the conscious but confused consumer, let's say, what should we be looking out for when choosing our products, and when deciding what we want our fashion and beauty habits to be? And I'll pose this to both Lisa and Colette. What advice do you have, and what insights do you have for the consumer? Either of you, perhaps Colette could go.
I can kick off. So I think there's indeed a couple of aspects to look at when you're consumers. So I think it's always a tricky thing to say the one thing is better than the other, because I think a lot of the things that we consume all have some environmental impact, but some are worse than others to a larger extent. So I think the way we can make choices is more about doing the least bad, let's say. And there's several ways to look at that as a consumer. So on the one hand, you can check out certifications. So there's certain organizations actually verifying how certain raw materials are being produced and under what circumstances, such as fair trade, but also Ecotex, and there's a lot more other labels out there. I think another aspect that you can consider as a consumer is to see what items are in your closet, and to gain an understanding of how often you've worn them, and to realize that the easiest way to reduce your impact is by wearing your clothes for a longer period of time, rather than wearing them once, hang them in your closet and leave them hanging there. Even if you don't like it anymore, then the better option is to try to find a new purpose for it, try to swap it with someone, or try to bring it to, I don't know, a secondhand shop, stuff like that, to prolong the lifetime of your clothes. I think those are sort of like the two aspects that I would suggest as concrete steps to take.
Yeah, I'll push the onus onto corporations. I believe that, big oil has put out such marketing to try to convince the consumer that plastic recycling is on them. And that, across all industries. And that's why I've been focused on supply chain as the root cause for climate change, because it truly comes down to the decisions that big corporations make to impact their bottom line rather than impacting the planet less negatively. So yes, I believe consumers need to educate themselves, but I truly think that fastest way for us to have a massive impact is to really change the oil industry. And when people think of oil, they don't think of fashion, but it is in fashion. It's polyester, it's, you know, our finishings and buttons. So we really need to hold our corporations accountable for their impact and create legislation, but also create a better mousetrap. And that's where investment comes in. I am building Refashion Ventures because I saw a lack of investment in the right things. And we need to be investing in the innovations that will create paradigm shifts for this industry rather than incremental change.
Absolutely. I mean, you can have a large group of conscious consumers, but without the supply, I think it is extremely difficult to really sort of be that responsible consumer. Just touching on one element that you mentioned, Lisa. So the actor that we've touched upon, but not elaborated on, is government. So what do you see as the role of government in facilitating this change? And are we seeing trends? You mentioned in your first answer around about legislation around moving overstock or kind of waste to other countries, and that countries are enacting legislation to prevent that. I mean, are we seeing a trend of more active government regulation in this sector? What are the limitations that are preventing from government from acting, and how do you see this changing?
Yeah, so I'm grateful for Europe leading on this and creating legislation even to either financially penalize or disincentivize companies around their textile waste being dumped in landfill or incinerated. There needs to be some recourse. And I believe that all businesses that push the tax, if you will, of recycling and sustainability onto the consumers need to actually own their own impact on the planet. And that needs to be regulated. Your cost of doing business is not just getting your product out the door, it's the impact. And so I think there is a massive need for regulation and systemic change at the government level, not just in fashion, but in all industries, to really hold businesses accountable for how they do business. You can no longer just think about, you know, oh, we're an innovative company. We create things that are desirable, viable, and feasible, but they also need to be sustainable. So you're incomplete if you aren't accounting for that last component of sustainability and actually having measurement. I think a lot of the sustainable initiatives have been greenwashing. There, I said it. You know, it's theater. And I think we've been letting people get away with that because it's possible. Nobody's holding them accountable. So we need better ways to hold companies accountable. And that also is one of the reasons why I figured I arrived at localization as being the only real chance we have of having transparency, circularity, sustainability, because you can actually measure and hold that local infrastructure accountable. So right now we have so much opacity built into our global supply chains intentionally. You know, and it's not just fashion, it's all industries with global supply chains. I was on a call with some government organization doing a talk, and it was talking about pig farming and how the supply chains for pig farms in the US were disrupted due to COVID. And I pushed back saying, well, there's really only 3 or 4 top processing companies that own the market of processing meat for pig farming. And they said, no, there's lots more. And I'm like, no, there really isn't. You need to have opacity, or you need to remove the opacity to have this transparency to enable access for smaller players to have an even footing on the market. And right now, it's just big dollars control the market, period, across the board. They like the opacity. It helps them. So we need to find ways that legislation can shift that to make them accountable.
Yeah, it seems like transparency will help government's job as well as the consumer. Really, it's what we need. And just in the last couple of minutes, we have one question from the audience, from Radhika Jadhar, who is asking, As someone who's trying to build a sustainable fashion brand from scratch, what are the steps or processes to go about it? And do you have any tips or guidance from your experience and what you've seen for her? And I would open this up to all three panelists.
Yeah, I'll share a couple of interesting companies that are helping emerging direct-to-consumer fashion brands. There's a company called Cala, ca.la, out of California, and they basically are a platform to help emerging designers, or even somebody that doesn't have a design degree, that just found something on Instagram they love and envision it in a different color with a different neckline and tapered to them, and whatever their vision is for a product, they can help you bring it to market. And so they charge the designers, I believe it's a monthly subscription fee, and they don't really take a lot on the upfront. They charge on your revenues. So if you sell a lot, they make more money, you make more money, and they help match you to factories that are can do small batches or quick turn, and that can be transparent on what their sustainability practices are. You choose which factory it's produced, and it brings down that threshold for an emerging designer to come to market. Another one is 19th Amendment and their enabled platform. They work with fashion designers with a capital F. They even do the on-demand manufacturing for Project Runway, all made in the USA here. There's a lot more innovations that are enabling this industry to shift drastically that not enough people really know about because they're underfunded. So I encourage you to do some digging and really support the emerging players in the industry. Lastly, there's also Makers Row. You can dig into Makers Row and do a search on all the made in the USA factories if you're in this region. And they have like a Yelp of factories giving you reviews and what their specialties are, etc.
Great, thank you. I'm conscious of time, so with Alessandra and Colette, any kind of last words either to answer this question or anything else you'd like to convey to the audience before we wrap up?
Yeah, maybe in general, I think also when starting your own brand, but also just as a person, it's always good to start out with what you value, right? So what are the things you care most about, and what is it you want to achieve with the actions that you take on a daily basis? So I think, yeah, when you're designing your new brand, you can start from a blank sheet and actually define that. So that's, I think, a very exciting thing to do.
I think Alpa, yeah. I would like only to say that I think that we are just at the beginning. There are a lot of possibilities in new research about everything: packaging, resources, biodegradability of the ingredients in our cases, solutions, for instance, for toiletries product that you have in your home, refill. There are a lot of topics. The resources of the plants is very famous. For instance, the topic of palm oil, that is one of the most important. Is not famous for Nutella only, but also is a tree very important in cosmetic. And now there are different certification like RSPO or other kind of important certification to respect this tree that is so important in many ingredients. But you can choose to respect the cultivation. So my last point is to invite people to believe in many solutions that we can find together in a sort of a connection between suppliers or expert university or people that work from companies to find together solution. And I see in my experience that it works. Because when at the beginning we realized new materials with the ingredients or raw materials that was not possible became possible. So if you try something new, sometimes works, and it's possible to do it, but you should try. And I see in my experience that people appreciate when something is difficult, but you can do it. And if you after you explain how much was difficult, but that is possible now to do, people appreciate this authenticity, and can choose your brand only for this, only for this. So we can work together to improve our planet. I believe in this.
Great, and on that positive note, I think it's a good moment to wrap up. And there's a lot to do, as Lisa said. We've only got a few years, so now is the time. And thank you to all three of the speakers for extremely insightful comments and sharing, and to the audience for joining. Please check out the rest of the Conscious Beauty series, and we look forward to more engagement and talks like this in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.